For years, since 2020, Simon and I have done Wine and a Book as book readings for Indie Author Week UK. And last year I thought I'd do a garden and a book, and it was a bad summer, so it wasn't really a time to do it. So back to Wine and a Book, and I'm going to wish everybody who sees this a very good health and everything. So good evening and welcome. There are 8 evenings of book readings to mark and promote Indie Author Week UK. Independent authors come in many shapes and sizes, many genres, and there is a great deal of talent that needs highlighting, so it's important to mark it. This evening I'm going to be reading from Simon's book. It was his second published book. His third. His third published book, Is No Problem. And this is the Tilia Publishing edition rather than the Brambleby Books edition, which preceded it, because he wanted to add in some extra chapters at the end for his cruise ship lecturing. So not that he got to write as much of that as he wanted to. So, yeah. This is going to be fun. Right, so page 131. It's a book about tour leading in different parts of Soviet Central Asia and Central America, South America. It's got the Galapagos in it. It's got Ecuador. This came from Ecuador. These came from Ecuador. And Turkey. And the extract that I'm reading is from his time in Costa Rica. He went to Costa Rica 9 times. So he had quite a lot that he did there. So it was pleasantly warm as we left our aircraft and made our way through the arrivals formalities. These seemed quite harmless, and once complete, we were met by Mario of Central American Tours. I was feeling very tired, and he kept mentioning the word voucher, like some sort of persistent gnat. Where is your voucher? He demanded. Being a Spanish speaker, he pronounced the word voucher. I haven't got one, I replied. Didn't Da Vinci give you a voucher? Da Vinci with a tour company. Well, it's a made-up name for the tour company. What sort of voucher? I asked. Central American Tours needs a voucher. You should have been given one. It is a voucher for the holidays of your party. It ensures us that we will be paid. I'm no good at doing a Spanish accent. Well, I don't have one, but I can assure you that Da Vinci has paid for these people to be here, I replied with more bravado than I felt. No problem, he said. I'm sure all is okay. I will fax Da Vinci tomorrow. Do not worry. Here are the vouchers you and your party will need. He handed me a stack of little pieces of paper, which corresponded to the various trips we would be making. They also included such important details as meals in the hotel and rooms where we would hopefully be sleeping. He took them back again, and when I pointed out that several of the excursions that had been arranged by Da Vinci had no corresponding vouchers, nor were they on the schedule that he had handed everyone. He promised to sort it with a repeat of those all too familiar words. No problem. This was a phrase which, over the next fortnight, was going to become unpleasantly familiar and usually meant the opposite. Soon we arrived at our hotel, the Hotel Irasu, and we were directed to our rooms. These were spacious and pleasant. However, some of us had a few niggling problems like no bath plugs, lights which didn't work, or water which refused to flow out of baths. Next morning, I woke up at 5 o'clock. At first, I resented the fact that I could not sleep any longer. A bird gave a dawn twitter. I realized with a jolt of excitement that twitter had to be from a bird I had never seen before. After all, this was Costa Rica. Very soon, I was outside in the gathering light of dawn, checking the early morning birds. Parakeets flew from flame tree to flame tree, annihilating the flowers. As they did so, they kept up a continuous, noisy and quarrelsome squawking. A ferruginous pygmy owl sitting on a telegraph wire was a delight. It was about half the size of our little owl. It looked at me fiercely as though it was my fault that it was being mobbed by all the local small birds. I returned to the hotel at 7 o'clock to be faced with the first crisis of the day. Several early rising members of my group were attempting to get breakfast, only to be told, firmly is too polite a word for how, that without a voucher, they could have no breakfast unless they paid for it. I couldn't believe that those silly little bits of paper I had returned to Mario the previous evening could cause so much trouble. However, 1 or 2 members of my group were already enjoying breakfast, apparently having managed to circumvent the voucher problem. I went and explained to the hotel staff that Central American Tours had all our vouchers. Our breakfast had been paid for and that Mario would bring the necessary vouchers at 9 o'clock. Grudgingly, the rest of us were allowed to help ourselves to breakfast. This was bureaucracy gone completely mad, I told myself. Breakfast, when we got it, was excellent. We helped ourselves to generous portions of tropical fruits. These included deliciously sweet, white-fleshed pineapple, surprisingly tasty bananas, and generous slices of watermelon and papaya. After this, we could help ourselves to as much scrambled egg, black beans with rice and sausages as we could manage. All this was washed down with a tropical fruit juice and lashings of delicious Costa Rican coffee. Promptly, at 9 o'clock, the hotel staff were already pestering me for the vouchers. Mario still hadn't appeared. Imagine my consternation when at 9:15, Mario turned out to be George. "Where's Mario?" I asked after George had introduced himself. "Oh, I've sacked Mario," George announced with a laugh. Anxiously, I tried to explain the voucher problem. "No problem," George laughed and went off to the main desk to sort things out. At 10:15, George re-emerged into the sunshine where the group were beginning to get restless, wondering when we would get started. "Everything sorted?" I asked. "No problem," George replied with a total lack of concern. "Now, Simon, we go on a city tour," he announced with a smile, leading us off to a waiting coach. San Jose is a bustling metropolis where cars always have priority over pedestrians. Pedestrian crossings don't exist. Although the crime and murder rate are very low in Costa Rica, the death rate from traffic accidents makes up for it. It is one of the highest rates in the world. First, we were taken to see the Opera House. This is a truly magnificent building in the true Spanish colonial tradition, although it was designed by a Belgian architect and prefabricated in Europe. It is quite as grand as any in Europe. In one part of the building, 3,000 different woods, all native Costa Rican timbers, make up a parquet floor. Above the main entrance to the auditorium, there is a painting. "The most famous painting in Costa Rica," George explained. "It depicts coffee and banana gatherers. The bananas are upside down and coffee doesn't grow on the coast. Apart from that, it's a fine painting." George laughed. "The painting is depicted on the very rare Costa Rican 5 colones note," he explained. Was it a fluke that outside the building there was a chap selling these notes in plastic bags for 500 colones each? Our visit was cut short. An impeccable Costa Rican traffic policeman was hovering by the minibus. George had been booked for illegal parking. Before we could do anything else, we had to go to the main police station to pay the fine. After paying the fine, we returned to the city centre again. The Metropolitan Cathedral George dismissed in the sentence. It was obviously not a feature of national pride. Finally, we arrived at the National Museum. Here the story of Costa Rican history was told and fascinatingly brought to life by George. He explained that 70% of Costa Ricans were Jewish. There had never been much mineral wealth in Costa Rica, made its people wealthy by hard work. As a result, Costa Rica is unique in Central and South America in that it never had a minority of very rich landowners. He explained there were no very poor people either. Costa Rica is a country with a large middle class, he explained proudly. This is why we have no political strife like our neighbours and no need for armed forces, as Costa Rica has nothing worth defending. Let us just say Panama invaded, I asked. Would America come to Costa Rica's aid? George laughed. Of course not, he replied. Why should they? Costa Rica has no oil or anything else to interest the Americans. In fact, Costa Rica was so poor and of such little value to outsiders that, following their freedom from Spanish colonial rule, nobody bothered to tell the Americans for 4 months. Costa Rica's riches are its people, said George. They come from all parts of the world and none are descended from rich landowners. With pride, George told us about President Oscar Arias, the then Costa Rican president, who had been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts in bringing peace and relative stability to the rest of Central America. He told us of a time when the Nicaraguan president arrived at the airport for a multinational conference on the future of Central America. He arrived in full military regalia, George explained. Instead of a guard of honour, he was greeted by young school children who gave him bunches of flowers. When President Arias finally met him, he told him to go home. I do not recognize you in that ridiculous fancy dress, he said. George was obviously a great patriot. I was beginning to wonder how much we should take all this propaganda with a pinch of salt. The morning finished with a visit to the university and a chance to support the Costa Rican economy. George took us to a typical tourist trap offering the inevitable international souvenirs, no doubt originating in Taiwan. See you tomorrow, said George as we arrived back at the hotel. The afternoon schedule is supposed to include a visit to a natural history museum, I reminded him. Oh, that, George scoffed. You don't want to see that. The specimens are all moth-eaten and falling apart. But it's on the itinerary, I countered. It's not worth it, countered George, and with that he got back onto the bus, gave a cheery wave, and was gone. My group looked at me and began muttering. How about an afternoon's bird watching after lunch, I suggested. So we had an impromptu and very successful afternoon looking at the many exotic and beautiful birds which inhabit downtown San Jose. When we arrived back at the hotel, I gathered there were still problems with our meal vouchers. Evidently, some junior at Central American Tours had faxed them to the wrong office. I was promised they would be ready by 6 o'clock. Only slightly reassured, I returned to my room for a shower, which was most enjoyable, except the water wouldn't run out of the bath. I informed the main decks. No problem, they assured me. The water was still in the bath, looking dirty, cold, and uninviting when I checked out a couple of days later. At 6 o'clock, I went to the main desk and was told the vouchers were still not ready. Don't worry, Mr. Davey, said the hotel clerk. They will definitely be ready when you need them for your dinner at 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock, he arrived. One of the less intelligent young lads was at the main desk, his rather narrow forehead knotted in concentration. Laboriously, he was copying out each voucher by hand. By 7:10, he had achieved vouchers for just one person. This is quite ridiculous, I pointed out. At this rate, none of us will get our supper for an hour and a half at the very earliest. Why can't you just do a block voucher for all of us? Okay, he replied helpfully. and soon I was presenting this precious document to the head waiter. It has to be a snag, I thought to myself over dinner. Tomorrow we will be coming down to breakfast at all hours, and I will have the only voucher. This is bound to be too complicated for the waiters to cope with. I better go and talk to the main desk yet again. No problem, Mr. Davey, I was reassured for the umpteenth time. Just show your block voucher to the waiters in the morning. It all seemed so simple. Now, was I going to do the next bit? I don't think I was. No, so that's tonight's reading. So, thank you for joining me. And yeah, it's tomorrow. I do reading from my little book, Freckles and Friends. The readings have been chosen at random, so that's why there's a sort of scattergram effect this time. Yeah, thank you for joining me. And for the video, if you are interested in learning more about the book, and especially if you'd like to buy a copy, please go to my website, www.tiliapublishinguk.co.uk, where copies are available. This book, Isla Problem, which is quite sobering as his wife, the number of escapades he got into. It's also on Amazon. The price is £9.95 plus postage and packing. And thank you very much, and cheers. Ding ding.